Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Eureka Centre. We're very pleased to have you with us tonight, and we're also live streaming it at home for people that are joining us, so welcome everyone. Today we gather on the lands of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and by extension to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who are joining us at the Eureka Centre or at home. Tonight we present the annual P Tobin Oration to mark the 166th anniversary of the Eureka Stockade. The event is named in honour of P Tobin OAM. Peter made a singular contribution to the preservation of the legacy of the Eureka Stockade, and his legacy lives on in many, many ways. Very pleased to welcome with us Mayor Councillor Daniel Maloney, Councillor Samantha McIntosh, Member for Buninyong Michaela Settle MP, and the family of the late Peter Tobin, his daughters Marie and Paula, and his sons Michael and Bernard. And please relay our best wishes to your mother, Faye. And David Bannear, who's also here with us today, who will very soon present the P Tobin Oration. Also very pleased to have with us Tammy Gilson, who's a traditional owner from Wadawurrung country, the land in which her grandmother walked. So please join me in welcoming Tammy to provide a welcome to country.
Wanga Merkul, Nadawadan Nandik Tammy, Jalalali Wadawarang Bagadak, Midiu Woganya Karingalabu, Nailungo Ikuli, Nailingo Ik Bagadak, Kimban, Wadawarang Tabiao, Wadawarang Murup, Wadawarang Karingalabu, Wadawarang Woganya Bunjul. Good afternoon, everybody, distinguished guests, the Mayor and councillors, and everybody. I'd like to say it is with great honour that I welcome you to country today for the 166th year anniversary celebration of the Eureka Stockade. I'd like to begin by paying my respect to my ancestors and my elders who have walked before me. I acknowledge our First Nations people, community, brothers and sisters. I'm on Wadawurrung country, my nan's country, and I acknowledge all of country that you may be on this afternoon. I acknowledge the spirit of country, our Karingalabu Bunjul, our creator spirit, who, along with his family, created Wadawurrung people and this sacred place. The sacredness and spiritual connection of my ancestors and country is something that we cannot see. As a Wadawurrung woman, I feel it every day. It is what we call the intangible. Before colonisation, my ancestors lived a harmonious life. They created the first knowledge systems, had no stress, and they created their law. On December the 3rd, 1854, that balance of harmony was lost. In Ballarat, we called a peaceful resting place at home. Balla meaning bended elbow, at meaning at home. There was once a big old grandfather tree not far from here in the Curtis Street car park. Wadawurrung people would gather and celebrate in what we called a bay air. The bay coming from Bayami, the emu creator spirit. Air meaning coming together to encircle. Through ceremony and dance, my old people put their energy into country and the trees, and that's why it is so sacred. Through Ballarat, the Yarrawee River, it runs. We call in Wadawurrung language Yarmlock, and Yarrow meaning rapid water, and we meaning the fire. Our Wadawurrung women carried that fire along that river. It's such a significant place here, and we could only imagine the hardships that my ancestors endured at the time of colonisation. Every day brings a new challenge for all community. We are always fighting for recognition, our culture and our rights as Aboriginal people. We are getting stronger as a First Nations people. We are yarning up country. To me, culture is everything. We still continue our cultural practices today and are revitalising our languages. No matter where you are on country, you will always be on Aboriginal land. May we recognise the important and ongoing commitment that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people hold in community and their continued connection to our living waters and our country. Kimban Wadawarang Tabio. I stand here proud as a Wadawurrung woman and I welcome you all to country today and please enjoy the presentation. Nyatni Kubara Kungaji is thank you, take care and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Now, at the end of David Bannear's speech, there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions. In the audience, we have a number of people, including academics and people with a real passion for Ballarat's history. So David will field or ask the audience to field some questions, and then we will share those with the audience at home as well as here. So it's now my great pleasure to invite Mayor Councillor Daniel Maloney to speak about the extraordinary man this lecture is named after, and that's P Tobin. And the Mayor will also introduce our special guest speaker, David Bannear. Please welcome the Mayor.
Thanks very much, Anthony, and thank you, Tammy, for that beautiful welcome to country, especially the reminding us of language and what it means. We really appreciate that. I want to start, of course, by acknowledging that the land on which we meet today, this sacred land for more reasons than one, is Wadawurrung land, and to pay respects to the Wadawurrung people of Kulin Nation, respects to elders past, present and emerging, and by that extension to all Indigenous people who are with us today at the Eureka Centre or who are joining us perhaps online today. I think that there's an incredible Aboriginal past that obviously goes back tens of thousands of years, but of course had a significant moment here in the gold diggings and those incredible moments at Eureka. Welcome today, everyone, to this year's P Tobin Oration. I'd like to welcome my colleague, Councillor Samantha McIntosh, the member for Bunningyong, Michaela Settle, welcome. Our guest speaker, of course, Mr. David Bannear. I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation soon, David. Members of the Tobin family, welcome today. It's incredible to have you here. I have many apologies, which I won't go through, but I know most of our councillor group and our federal member, Catherine King, and our member for Wendouree, Juliana Addison, we're all pretty keen to be here, but unfortunately we have limits on the numbers of people we can have in the building. Today, of course, we're here on the 166th anniversary of the Eureka Stockade, at the site where this historic event occurred. Eureka continues to intrigue and engage. It's an event of national significance and one that is highly contested in the Australian community. Eureka has had a profound impact on the Australian identity and the character of our democracy. An important part of our annual Eureka commemoration, of course, is the activities and this P Tobin Oration. P Tobin OAM was passionate about Eureka and he worked tirelessly to ensure it was honoured and remembered. At a time when interest in Eureka was in decline, he kept its spirit alive. This year, we're honoured to have archaeologist David Bannear with us to speak at the event named in Peter's honour. Welcome again, David. I'll now share with you an abridged version of a biography about Peter, who was written by Ron Egberg, not only a past director of the Eureka Stockade here, but of course Ron is a passionate supporter of the Eureka story. Now Ron's extract reads, Peter Tobin was born in 1941. His father Noel had been a funeral director in Maryborough but relocated to Ballarat to assist with the education of his children. After Peter left school, he worked for a short time with solicitors Burn Jones and Tawney and then joined his father in the funeral business. Peter married his wife Faye in 1963 and they had 4 children, Marie, Paula, Bernard and Michael, many of whom are here today. When Peter's father became ill, they relocated to the funeral premises in Dawson Street South, where they remained for 10 years. Peter, with his brother, also ran the Shoeing Forge service station on the corner of Dawson and Dana Streets. And as well as being a prominent businessman in Ballarat, Peter also had a strong community-minded side. In 1979, Peter and Doug Serra, together with a few others, formed the Eureka Commemorative Society to promote the significance of Eureka. That society sought to correct the historical perspective and importance of Eureka and encourage discussion, debate and honour the Eureka story. To this end, it was thought appropriate that a recognisable monument should be built to honour Eureka, and hence the large flagpole at the Bakery Hill roundabout was erected to fly the Eureka flag to mark the 125th anniversary of Eureka in 1979. Peter was also a member of the Board of Directors of Sovereign Hill, having held the position of President. And Peter said that a major highlight of his life was the privilege of assisting in the repatriation of the unknown Australian soldier from Villers-Bretonneux in France in November 1993. The soldier had died at the end of World War I, and Peter and Rob Allison from Allison Funerals were given the responsibility of ensuring the safe passage of the soldier's body from France back to Australia. Returning to his home, the unknown soldier was interred in the Hall of Memory at the Australian War Memorial on Armistice Day with a slouch hat, a sprig of wattle and soil from the battlefield. Peter's passion and commitment to Eureka and his work to ensure its respectful and important place in Australia's history culminated in the staging of the 140th anniversary of the Eureka Uprising. After it had successfully concluded, he said the Society had met all of its aims for the anniversary of the arousing of public interest, stimulating public debate and helping to restore miners' and soldiers' graves in the old Ballarat cemetery, so that future generations could come and see the sacrifice that was made so many years ago. Peter said, and I quote, "Eureka must rank in the history of this country as an event that has generated more myths and facts, legends and information, passion and disinterest than any other event." Sadly, Peter died on the 29th of March 2000 and aged only 59, a tragic loss to Ballarat and Eureka. His contribution to our community and the commemoration of the Eureka Stockade in particular is remembered annually through this, the P Tobin Oration. So that was the extract from Ron Edberg's biography on Peter. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce David Bannear to deliver the 2020 P Tobin Oration. David has an MA in Archeology from the University of Cambridge, and between 1988 and 1995 he undertook an historical archaeological survey of every Victorian goldfield for the Victorian Government. He identified the Castlemaine diggings as the best preserved gold rush landscape in Victoria, a finding that led to its inclusion on the National Heritage List. His work has ensured that numerous other historical sites and places, including this here, the Eureka Stockade Memorial Park, were protected by listing it on the Victorian Heritage Register, including hundreds of archaeological sites now on the Victorian Heritage Inventory. David was also involved in early development of the case for the UNESCO World Heritage nomination of the Central Highlands Goldfields, and continues to be vitally interested in the success of that bid that is strongly supported by our city. The title of David's talk today is The Archaeology of the Eureka Stockade Reserve, Surviving Mining Relics of the Ballarat and Other Central Victorian Goldfields, and their contribution to the proposed World Heritage bid. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Bannear to present this year's oration.
Yeah, bear me, I got this device. I just put the first... Oh, it's working. Oh, that's all right, I can take the mask off, sorry about that. My talk's really going to be about archaeology, but it's also about cultural heritage significance, about sometimes it's what you see, sometimes it's what's buried, and sometimes it's what you feel. And I think, my feeling about this place here, it's about how you feel about it. But first of all, I'd like to recognise oh, hang on, I lost the... Sorry. At the beginning, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live, and respect the elders past, present and future. Before beginning, I want to talk about... I was shown these sites. When I first came here, they said you'd never find Aboriginal cultural heritage in the Central Victorian Goldfields, and I was taken around and shown some sites by a Jarrah elder from Castlemaine, Uncle Brian, and I'm just going to show a couple of slides of what we found. So these are grinding grooves, these along the River Loddon. Rock wells for drinking. It's interesting, in the Castlemaine Park, they all line up north and south. There's a number of them, but you don't find them elsewhere. And also scar trees. They're mainly in dead trees because most of the other trees have been sort of cut down in the gold rush and the coppice regrowth, but if you look hard enough you'll find some old dead trees and they usually have scars. This is near Expedition Pass Reservoir at Castlemaine. My love of archaeology began when I was young. My father brought my mother back from England after the Second World War, and she introduced me to the world of Homer, and I read the Iliad Odyssey, the children's version of it, and ever since I was captured by the power of discovery of archaeology. And this is just a slide of a mine site at Bendigo. That's before the site. This is the Katherine Reef United mine site at Eaglehawk, and this is after it was excavated. Massive machinery foundations. There's a huge crushing battery here and stonework, but you wouldn't imagine underneath the sand there was an amazing site. And the other thing, I reckon, the problem with discovery from an archaeologist is only I feel it as an archaeologist, because really only archaeologists are the ones who dig these places up. And I reckon the closest I ever found that connection to the people was actually in Ballarat, when we found the memorial left behind in the Burke and Wills Monument in the main street. And I remember we cut the thing open and there were about 200 people all around, and we pulled out this amazing discovery of all the coins and the rotten newspapers and the bottles, and this whole crowd found what I love about archaeology, which is a sense of discovery. Archaeology began 200 or 300 years ago, and it began in a time when the world was believed in the Bible and the idea of Moses and the flood. And then in about 200 years ago, geologists began to talk about a thing called about how the world is created by natural forces, by mountain building and erosion. And here's a few slides. This is the evolution of the Victorian Goldfields. The Victorian Goldfields, 480 million years ago, this is all sea, and two tectonic plates collide, squash the land, the seabed, stick it on its edge and rise it up. And that creates Central Victoria 480 million years ago. So when you walk on the land here, you're actually walking on the edges of the seabed, not the flat surface. And so this is erosion bearing the sandstone. About 440 million years ago, the original gold rush miners thought gold fell from the sky and grew like carrots, but modern geologists feel that the gold was formed in the centre of the earth, and it came up through cracks in the earth crust and solidified in these massive quartz mountains. There's only one of these left in Victoria. Most of them were mined away because they had gold in them, but this one is in a geological reserve near Talbot called Big Hill. And it's just a mountain of quartz, but didn't have any gold, so it wasn't taken away. Then you have the volcanics overlaying that, and then you have the granite. You have this geological layer that you don't find often, but it's the elevated leads. It's ancient riverbeds that are preserved on tops of hills. They're like concrete. Around Castlemaine, a lot of gold came from there, but most of these geological deposits were mined by miners, so it's very rare to see them. But that's an elevated lead. That's an ancient bed of the River Loddon near Vaughan. And then you just have modern alluvials, that's where the miners found the first gold. The other concept of archaeology is stratigraphy. That's a very early drawing done by a famous archaeologist, Mortimer Wheeler. He was a military man, but it's all about that if the strata's not disturbed, then everything's in a sequence, with the youngest at the top and the oldest at the bottom. And this shows another layer of deposits here where you have the natural clay. This is from Ballarat, deposit with artefacts in and other deposits above that. So that's a stratigraphy. So those two concepts really are the key to archaeology. Archaeology sites are made up of three things. One is features. This is a remarkable discovery that was made in Thunder Street at Bendigo. It's a Chinese brickmaking kiln that dates to 1857. The extraordinary thing about that, every one of those bricks was made to make the brick kiln, and it was huge. It could produce 10,000 bricks in a single firing. We dug it up and then buried it again, so no one knew what to do with it, I think. Then you have artefacts and deposits. These are Chinese artefacts from a market garden site. And these are just pure artefacts. These were found under the floorboards of an old house that was demolished, gin bottles. So presumably the builders had a drink before they put the floor on. Now I go to Eureka. You all remember this thing, but this shows you the gold leads. So the green bits are the actual deep leads that run through. That's the reserve here. That's the deep leads that run. So they're the buried riverbeds, and these are the alluvial gold. So it has shallow gold and it has deep gold. And this is a picture of how it was drawn by Andrew Smith. This shows you just how the miners were dug down and mined the shallow gold through using shafts. The second phase of mining at Eureka was the Chinese came and sluiced the worked out ground. And the third phase was when they sank deep shafts to get to the Eureka lead. To do deep lead mining, you sink a deep shaft, because basically they are mining rivers that still run underground. So what they do is they sink below the deep lead, which drains it. And you can see they're bailing the water here, and then they can mine the lead that's been dried of its water. And that's what they were doing at Eureka and elsewhere. And this is the monument. When the archaeologists, the excavation here occurred about 20 years ago, and the archaeologists found in the stratigraphy all those three layers of mining. So he found shallow alluvial diggings, he found the sluicing, and he found a deep shaft. And he concluded that the actual site, he didn't think the site of the Eureka Stockade is where he's dug, which is around here. He thought it lay near the 1884 monument, which is in untouched ground, so perhaps it is there. The most notable find on the excavation was this pepperbox pistol. The top photo is of what it looked like when it was dug up, and this is when it was conserved at Heritage Victoria's conservation lab. Now, what I want to talk about, because people think, because they did find artefacts here, but you can't actually use historic artefacts to say precisely they are associated with the battle. I'm going to show you a series of photographs. All these are mainly done through the manufacturing marks. All these artefacts date in a period between 1851 and 1865 because you can use the manufacturing marks to do that. This is a bottle, and this has actually got Ballarat written on it. You can't see it, but Ballarat with two A's. That's a pickle bottle. They're quite early. They were started to be manufactured in England in about 1840. And these are the key ones. So you see this first one. This is J. Bourne. So these are ginger beer bottles. Ceramic ginger beer bottles are imported from England. And J. Bourne, he was only J. Bourne from up until 1851. And after 1851, his sons came into his business. And after 1858, he shifts his pottery elsewhere. So these two artefacts really precisely date within a period of time between up until about the 1860s. And this is Roland Lewis. These are the user's mark. He was a aerated water manufacturer at Ballarat that began manufacturing here about 1856, but he used J. Bourne's vessels to put his ginger beer in. This is a really unusual artefact. This is a handmade perforated brick. I've never found, I don't know as anybody's ever found another one, but it comes from a site in Ballarat, and it was produced by steam machinery which operated in Ballarat from about 1856 to about 1862, then the company went bust. So that's again precisely dates it to that gold rush period. And this is obvious, this is a store token dating to 1861 from Ballarat, again with the two A's. These tokens were circulated by storekeepers because there was a lack of money on the goldfields, so they created their own money. And the reason why the golden rule of archaeology is that it can only be as old as the youngest find. So all those finds, and on it were nothing younger. And this is people remember these had little marbles on the top, and you used to break the top off to drink them. And they were widely found on archaeological sites in Victoria from the late 19th century, but none of those are found on the site. So that clearly shows that, that deposit. So you can date to a time period, but you can't actually date to an exact day. Eureka, this is the last time I came to a large event here. I think this was in 2004. I think David Hicks's dad was talking. And Eureka is this important place. Like, I don't know, like, my love of archaeology, I approach archaeology from a way that I think I've now determined it was because of my father, and he was a man who loved the history. I come from the mid-north of South Australia, and he loved to drive around and tell me things about things in the landscape, about stories, but I only worked out a while back he wasn't actually talking about the fabric of the place, he was talking about the people who lived in those places. So he wasn't a heritage architect, he loved the story. So he would get a place like Eureka because he'd know the story of it and he'd feel the story and he would think it was significant. Like, it's an interesting thing that the MCG is seen as this great, significant place. The oldest fabric on the MCG now is the 1984 Like Towers, yet it's still seen as historic and significant. So you don't have to have fabric, you just got to feel it's significant. Now, as to the site, like, I put this place, this reserve on I was the officer who did the nomination for it, and I know there was a lot of debate from people, and I read it all about where it was, you got the wrong spot, but I decided that the best way was to respect what happened immediately after the battle, and the local council here reserved this land. You can see the beginning of the reservation there in 1870, and in the correspondence said, we think this is the bulk of the battleground is covered by this reservation. So in 1870 they said this is the battleground, and then in 1884 about 200 old-timers came here. They all disagreed where the exact spot was. They had a fair barney. They didn't shoot one another. And then they agreed to disagree, and they chose this spot as where they think that the stockade was. So it's interesting that the archaeologist kind of concluded that he thinks it's there. And that's how I formed this nomination, that, if those people in the 19th century who have first-hand experience couldn't get it right, well, how can we get it right today? How can you argue otherwise? This is one of my favourite people, Weston Bates. He encouraged me a lot. And this is the other great protest site in Victoria. This is the monster meeting or great meeting site at Chewton, which began in 1851, which was the first large protest meeting. It was on freehold property, but the Victorian government has now purchased this, and it's now being placed in the National Park at Castlemaine, and a monument's been put up there, and the local community at Chewton have an event there every year. Now I'm going to talk a bit about deep lead mining. there's a fundamental difference between Bendigo and Ballarat, because Ballarat was, for its early, well, till it became a city, was a deep lead mine place. Bendigo was a quartz mining. And this just comes from a Earth Resources Regulation map, but it shows you, this is just part of Bendigo, it shows you how many shafts are under where we are. There's shafts everywhere. But deep lead mining in Ballarat ended in the 1870s, and then the land was built over. At Bendigo, because it was quartz mines, they just went deeper and deeper, and by the early 1900s they were down 5,000 feet, and so the city went around their mines, not over the top of them. And that's why if you go to Bendigo you see lots of ruins of mines, because the city wasn't built on top of them, and that's why Bendigo really has very little of its historic mining relics left. I'll show you examples of them now. This is a mine site that is on the edge of the road, where it's close to where Ballarat mining is now. It's just the machinery, and the reason that's quartz mining, and the reason it's there is that by the time quartz mining occurred in Ballarat, they were starting to use cement in the mortar, concrete cement in the mortar, so it's difficult to demolish things without breaking the bricks, so a lot of foundations survive. This is some more out near where Ballarat gold mining. These are just machinery mines from quartz mining. There's some alluvial workings in the Arena Historic Reserve. And in a shed at Narina, there's foundations of a gas producer plant for hydraulic sluicing works. Now I'm going to try to put it in Ballarat and Central Victoria in the context of gold mining. This is a map that shows all the gold deposits of Victoria. You see there's a whole series in Central Victoria, and there's some up in the Alps and some down this way. And I'll go through, because what I'm going to show you now is Barry Gamble has been working on establishing universal values for the World Heritage bid for the Central Victorian Goldfields. And he recognised 4 stages of mining which he sees, and I'm not dealing with the architecture of the goldfields, but the architecture mainly lies in the government precincts like at Lydia Street and Roslyn Park at Bendigo. But these are historic mine sites, and he was saying there's 4 development layers that are represented, and he feels that they have world values because of the importance of gold mining in the 19th century. And so this shows you, these are the early huts, like mainly most of these images comes from the Castlemaine Park, which is that well preserved. There's probably about 800 of these little sites in the park, and these are just the chimneys left behind, and they would have had canvas tents. This is how they mine. They mine with a cradle, the gold pan. They dug their shafts, and they weren't supposed to undermine. Like when you first came to the gold rush, you were only allowed to have 8 foot square, and that's all. You weren't allowed to undermine, but people did, especially the Cornish. This is evidence left of the alluvial diggings, the chalets. Each one of those holes is a miner, it's a person digging. This is in the Castlemaine Park, and this one is in a cleared paddock near the number 1 lead near Denali. Then by 1853, they introduced puddling machines. Puddling machines, they think, are the first and only Victorian bit of technology developed. They appear on the goldfields about 1853. The horse pad, you can fit about 2 tonne of dirt in the trough, and these rakes go around, and then they release the slurry, and the gold's right at the bottom, because gold's 16 times heavier than anything in that water. And this is the remains of a puddling machine in the Castlemaine diggings. I tell you interesting things about, I found a whole mob of these puddling machines around Beaufort, And they're pretty easy to find because I found on the map there was this 2-puddler track, and I thought, good, I'll find 2 puddlers on this track. Go out there, there were 9. So I don't know what that meant, whether they couldn't count or... They also diverted the streams to dry out the creek beds because you can't really get alluvial gold unless you have dry deposits. So sometimes they just dug trenches like here. You can see the trench here and they mined this side, so they diverted the stream this way and mined this way. Sometimes they dug tunnels. There's one at Dalesford. And sometimes they did embankments as well. And then they sluiced it. So basically they just used the gravity, the power of water to wash the gold out of the dirt they quarry from the gullies. And this is what kind of landscapes they leave behind. These again come from the Castlemaine Diggings National Heritage Park. They leave bare gullies, and you can see that's where the sluice was, and you can see all the stones have been forked out of it. By about the turn of the 20th century, they introduced pump sluicing, where they used, instead of gravity, they used steam or gas producers to drive pumping engines. And this is an example of one. They had big monitors and they just used water cannons to blast away the sediments. Apparently, if you walked in front of that, they would cut a man in half. They were incredible forces, and they left landscapes like this. Again, these are in the park, but these huge sluice holes where everything has been taken away. This is a gas producing, this is a hydraulic sluicing works preserved at Forest Creek near Chewton, and it has a 200 power gas engine that drove the pumps, and it was a producer gas one, so this was run by Alf Cox, and he burnt firewood in that to produce carbon monoxide gas that was fed in to drive the engine. Remarkable. And then there were bucket dredges. Bucket dredges come in the 1900s. They were just dug everything away. This is a dredge. This is a dredge at Vaughan. They used to get tipped over by floods and all that. They weren't good in floods, so this one was capsized. I think Susan Lawrence talked about the sludge from these things last year. The miners, when they first came to dig the gold, just worked the surface. So these are just surface workings. They mined the quartz reefs by quarrying or sinking shallow tunnels. And they were after gold that was very high, quartz high in gold, sometimes, 2 or 3 ounces to the tonne. They used horsepower a lot early on. This is a whip, where they just use the horse to pull the bucket up, and the horse then reverses and it lowers the bucket, or whims, where the horse walked around and drove a drum that did the same thing. You see all these at Sovereign Hill. And this is an example of, these are from Malden, but only I can see this. I say you might be able to see. That's the whim platform there, and you can see a hole there, but you've got to use your imagination sometimes. They also roasted the ore early on because the crushing machinery was wasn't that strong, so they used to roast the ore. This is a roasting kiln. You can see them, they're burnt red, and they'd have a load of firewood at the bottom, quartz, firewood, quartz, and then they'd light the firewood and it would roast the ore till it became a pinky colour and it would crush easy. There's not many of these left in Victoria. The only ones left I've ever found in Victoria are in the Castlemaine Park. There's at Malden, in the Muckleford Forest between that. There's one at Beechworth and there's one on Mount Disappointment, and that's a lot. But, so most of these are based around Castlemaine to Malden. They had very simple batteries powered by small engines driven by steam power. This is a drawing of one done by Rod Kaufman. So you have the steam boiler providing the power, the engine driving the battery, and this is a Cornish one. Most of the technology early on was Cornish, because you've got to remember at Burra there were about 5,000 Cornish miners at the copper mine there, and they came to the gold rush, so they brought knowledge of their technology with them. And that's an evidence as one of the battery sites. That's the remains of the boiler setting, so there would have been a big round boiler sitting on those two parallel stone walls. They also bought Cornish engine houses. This, according to Dr. Peter Milner, is the earliest Cornish house in Victoria. It was for quartz mining, was put in 1857 at Castlemaine in the Specimen Reef mine. And the other thing that the Cornish bought was, I don't know if you've ever been to Burra, but even Burra was this huge, highly mechanised mine, but the flues went up the hill to small chimney stacks on the top. So they didn't build gigantic chimney stacks to produce a draft. They put the flue going up the hill. It's called the Cornish ones. In the Castlemaine Park, Castlemaine Park, there's a series of these. You can see the flue going up there to a small chimney stack. Here's another one. There's about 10 of these in the Castlemaine Park, and I've never found them anywhere else in Victoria. So they're really early quartz mining, and it's to do with Cornwall. They'll go to deep lead mining. They first did shallow deep lead mining, where they just used whims and puddling machines, and this is a whim. Yeah, oh well, you can laugh, Robin. And this is a puddling machine. You've got to use your imagination. And then to go below 50 metres, 50 feet, they had to use steam power, and and the deep lead mine was, they put all the washing machines, the puddling machines, on stilts above the ground, so they dumped the material over the sides. So you don't find any of this evidence left anymore. Sometimes you find the posts, but you don't find where they process the alluvial deposits on the deep lead mine. You only see the engine beds and the waste heaps. There's Peter Milner, like South Australia is seen as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution in Australia because of the copper mining that came there in the 1840s, and they had Cornish technology. But Peter Milner worked out that Victoria has just as many Cornish engine houses as South Australia, and we have about 2 intact examples and about 6 others that are in ruins. This is the Grand Duke at Timor, one of the largest ones, and this is one of the intact ones. This is Berry number 1 near Smeaton. That's on Crown land. Oh, it's kind of owned by Victrac. They must have bought it so they could process the pebble dump, I think. Now I'll go to quartz mining. Quartz mining was all the technology of quartz mining was Cornish. This just shows how a typical mine went down. They drove a shaft, and they always drive the shaft in the stable ground, and then drive across to the reefs, and then they mine upwards, which is called stoping. And this is how they mine upwards. So they actually stope all the way to the surface, fill below, and then go down another 100 feet. They used engines like this, and there still remains of these early ones in the Castlemaine Park. This is Spring Gully mine. It's massive stone foundations. And then modern mining, this is Wattle Gully. This came in the 1950s. It still has its head frame, its winding engine, and the other motive power they used for crushing was water wheels. There's 2 water wheel abutments. There's a couple intact ones lying in the bush up in the Alps, but around here in central Victoria there's only 2 remains of foundations. This is the Garfield water wheel, and this is the Mopoke water wheel near, which is on private property, but I think the Victorian government is considering buying that as well. The stampers, they're just like big things that went up and down. They were heavy. They crushed the rock to a powder. And this is, keep pressing that one, Ron. This is just the early one at Fiddler's Reef Mine near Avoca. And then you have remains of the actual batteries. All the machinery has been removed, but you can see these big, they've always bedded their batteries on 2-foot square river red gum blocks, mortar blocks, because they couldn't put masonry there or it would be just shatter, so they used timber as a base of the foundations for their crushing batteries. And this is the battery that still survives at Wattle Gully. It was last worked about 15 years ago when they were mining the Poverty mine at Tarnagulla, and they brought the ore to Castlemaine to crush. By the 1870s, when they crushed the gold to a powder, they floated over mercury, and the gold falls into the mercury. That's called the amalgamation process. But when the ore comes from below the water table, it's heavily mineralised, and they have to use different devices. And they introduced the chlorination method in the 1870s, and this is the chlorination works at Tooting, another site that the Victorian government bought to add to the park. And they roasted the ore in furnaces like this. The roasted stuff is really deadly. There's not much of it around. It's pink, but... and then they cyanided. They bought cyanide process. The rights to the cyanide process was purchased by the Victorian government and given to miners. It's a cheap process. You just get a lot of the battery sand or the slums from a deep lead mine and soak it in a weak solution of cyanide. And this is cyanide works in the Castlemaine Park. Sea poison, they were pretty, work safe like that. And these are cyanide vats at a deep lead mine near Majorca. Now, I'm going to briefly end by talking about the World Heritage one. I'm just going to show you two images. This is Ballarat in South Australia, mid-north of South Australia. That's where I grew up, so I know a bit about Ballarat. I was the archaeologist there. I knew more about copper than gold when I came here. That's Ballarat. That's Ballarat in 1870. All right? And Ballarat, in 1845, Ballarat became the 10th largest place in Australia. It had a huge population of Cornish miners and Welsh smelters. In fact, anyway, I'm not going to tell that story. I was going to tell that story. I'm not going to tell that story. So that's Ballarat. 30 years after, Ballarat was one of the great copper mines of the world. It changed the nature of how copper was dealt with around the world. This is Castlemaine, 4 years after the gold rush began. And this is a fundamental difference between copper mining, and I'm going to quote Weston Bates here, the democratic mineral, that this is Castlemaine in 1857. Look at it, compared to what Ballarat was. And Ballarat was a company mining town, the people that run the Ballarat mines were in the Bank of England. They were captains of industry. They had hired labourers. The miners at Ballarat, if you didn't live in the company accommodation and buy the company goods, you had to live in caves along the Ballarat Creek. 5,000 miners were living along. A big flood came down, washed them all out. Henry Ayres, who was the head of the mining company, later became Premier of South Australia, and they named a rock after him. He writes to his doctors saying, treat the men, miners first, do not treat the women and children. That's the difference between what gold is and what copper is. Copper was, based on basic slavery. So when the gold miners came in, Ballarat never got local government until 1872, when the mining company left town. Castlemaine, Ballarat, Bendigo, they had local government by 1854. So that's the difference between what one mineral did, and that's why I think places like Eureka and the places I've seen are so significant to one of the great stories of Victoria. Oh, did I turn it off? That's the end of it. That's good. How do I go in time? Is there any questions? Yeah?
because they're on private land and we've got this great development boom going on in areas like Sebastopol. But also I'm particularly concerned that in the Creswick Regional Park, at the moment, the water races and Chinese gardens from the gold era are very much under threat by a plan to put mountain biking trails through the Creswick Regional Park. Could you comment on how these endangered sites could be
yeah, I've got to repeat the question. So you have two questions there. One is about how do you protect the mullock heaps and that from the deep lead mining around Ballarat, and what process is in place for planning the mountain bike park at Creswick and the water races. Yeah, all right. Well, Hepburn Shire protected all the mullock heaps on the very deep leads through placing them on the planning scheme. That's how they protected their thing. So that's the answer to that. If you want these things, you place them on the planning scheme, and there's a process to consider what should occur on those sites. So I was involved in, I don't know how many times I went to the buried deep lead around Smeaton, but every mullock heap there is protected under the Hepburn planning scheme. So every time someone wants to do something, then there has to be a discussion held. And so by and large, most of them have been protected. Heritage Victoria also has most of these listed as archaeological sites, perhaps not these ones, but that's another way you could go. And my approach to that was, if it's visible from the road and was a prominent landmark, then I would say to Heritage Victoria, then I don't think this site should be disturbed. Sometimes the mining companies only want to look at the pebble dumps, and they've already been quarried, so we would allow that to do that. But the mullock heaps, which were the landscape markers, were always protected. So it's a planning scheme or listing on the Victorian Heritage Inventory. As for the mountain bike park at Creswick, I don't know much about that, but I do know there was a heritage survey done, or supposed to have been done, that would have identified where the trail should go so it didn't impact on any archaeological features. That's as much as I know there. So it's all about knowing where these places are and how significant they are, and the mechanisms by which you protect them. That's what you need to be in place. The Hepburn Shire, I think, theirs went on the planning scheme before I came here. They were on the planning scheme 25 years ago, I think. And it was done, I don't know how it got on there. I don't know the answer to that, but they're all on. Because I was always going over there talking to mining companies about, well, you can take this remnant of the pebble dump because you can't see it from the road, there's no archaeological relics here, but you can't touch the mullock heap. Has that answered your question?
Thank you.
Yes?
Can you explain to us why, in as much as trying to get World Heritage recognition and substantial funding for Central Victorian Goldfields, why does it stand out so significantly to you and us in terms of the amount of gold sites, and also in terms of the richness of it and the variety of it, as against other places in the world such as America?
So you're talking about a comparative analysis between different gold rush field. That's kind of been done. Like the way it went, like I was involved in the early nomination, and the Victorian government put a proposal, or Heritage Victoria put a proposal to the Commonwealth government, and the Commonwealth government response was, yeah, it looked pretty good, but you have to do the comparative analysis with all the other goldfields in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, in America, and even Siberia and Russia. And I said, well, I'm not going to Siberia and Russia, it's too cold. But, and this is how it stacks up, this is my feeling, that in Victoria, it's complicated to explain, but it all goes back to Latrobe, the government. He was a good governor, and he didn't let the squatters, he controlled the power of the squatters, and he also had this idea of the public interest or the common good, and he set aside land for townships, for botanic gardens and all that. He was an incredible town planner, right? But they also made a decision, and I've never ever found how that decision was made, that they would not sell off the goldfields. So the goldfields always remained public land. In New South Wales it was different. In New South Wales they allowed a lot of the land to be sold off. But in Victoria, that's why we have these towns like Tarnagulla, Maryborough, Castlemaine, Ballarat, all surrounded by state forests. They're the goldfields. And they weren't allowed to settle them because the government was under pressure for, opening up the land, but they did not. So we ended up with one of the best preserved mining landscapes in Australia. And if you looked at New Zealand, the problem with New Zealand is, and that was mainly a gold rush that came from Victoria, because 30,000 miners left here from Victoria to go to the New Zealand gold rushes in 1861. They did massive hydraulic sluicing, so everything was washed away. So there's nothing left from their gold rush apart from a few towns. There's no trace of their gold rush. It's all been obliterated by bucket dredges and hydraulic sluicing. The same in California. All their historic gold rush sites are marked by monuments. They just shifted the whole landscape by blasting it away with hydraulic sluicing. So I think it was luck. It was because of Latrobe's decision about the common good and the public interest. It's about the fact that we didn't sell our gold land off here. And it's also a fact, like, I was the archaeologist at the Ballarat copper mine. And when I came, and the first goldfield I surveyed was the Castlemaine one, and I remember writing in my report that, well, there must be better stuff elsewhere because this is so accessible, like it's so close to. But for some reason around Castlemaine, it survived in this incredible landscape. Elsewhere, not so much. I don't know why. I think it might be because of the topography, or there's something that protects it. I don't know. But we have the best of the best in gold rush stuff here because the rest of it was destroyed elsewhere. Any other questions? Why don't someone ask me what my most significant find was?
What was your most significant find?
Good. Two things. One, when I did archaeology in England, we mainly excavated Roman cemeteries, and I was working at Winchester, and I've never forgotten this. This haunts me, this one. And Roman cemeteries are outside the city walls, and they're along roadways, so you just find the roadway and you find Roman burials. And they didn't have a good idea about infant mortality because we found numerous baby skeletons in the roadside ditch. They just seemed to chuck them in or bury them there. And we dug up hundreds of these, hundreds of little babies just chucked in the ditch. Sometimes you actually found their bones mixed up in the mortar of structures. I don't know. I don't think they practiced infanticide, but I think they came close to it. And right towards the very early part of the cemetery, we'd gone through when they became Christian, and we got down to the stage where they were pagans. We got down to the earliest part of the cemetery, which would have been time that Caesar invaded England. And we found this beautiful little grave cut with a baby skeleton in it, and in his hand was a coin to pay the ferryman across the River Styx. The only one. And that has haunted me all my life. Why did they chuck hundreds away and this one, that one? That always haunts me. And the Ballarat one, when 200 people were ringed around me and we discovered this, and everybody felt the power of discovery, which only archaeologists feel because no one else is allowed on an archaeological site. That's it. I reckon I should end. How am I going for time?
Probably we could do one more question. Could I ask, if no one else could ask another question?
Yeah.
You also mentioned the beginning of your father going to places and rather than buildings, etc., she was impressed the story was about the people.
Yeah.
In terms of the goldfields of Victoria, one of the major aspects of the people across those central goldfields wasn't just the sites and their work and that. It was about what they stood for,
Yeah.
which was their rights
Yeah.
and democracy. So my question is, and that built up and came from Ballarat to Castlemaine to Eureka, culminated at Eureka. So in terms of international significance, is the story beyond your archaeology, in your discussions with the wider group, is that also an aspect of the story of this unique aspect of the goldfields of Central Victoria that will apply or have its significance internationally?
So your question is about, the democratic spirit of it and the town building. I think it is, because for a number of reasons. Like Eureka, I read it this once. Eureka there were lots of protests, rebellions in the 19th century because the world was moving from, into the idea of democracy in lots of places. And Eureka is the only one where there was a battle that was resolved in favour of the people fighting. So even though it was only a small battle, it was a pivotal moment that formed the miners' right. The miners' right becomes adopted of the way of mining across Australia, adopted overseas, in Canada and other places. The miners' right flows there. Even though this probably doesn't come from the gold rush, but the Australian ballot, you know about the Australian ballot? The Australian ballot goes to America. Australian ballot is secret ballots, and it was developed it emerged in South Australia and Victoria at the same time, where before that you had to put up your hand and say who you voted for. They moved to the Australian ballot, which was done in secret, and that was finally adopted in America before the end of the 19th century. So yeah, I think democracy was a big thing. And then there was things like the people that came here, like a woman who came to, was in a tent near Vaughan. Mary Helen Fortune became the world's first writer of female detective stories. When I first met Weston Bates and all that, Weston Bate, there were people who really were into this, and then I saw it all disappear. I think that's one of the sad things about it, that people don't understand how many layers of this story, this stuff we have to understand. And I think that's what the World Heritage thing will bring out, because it has to be about community stories as well. All right, what do you think? Now you've got to come and say something, don't you?
I will.
I've got to put my mask on.
Well, thank you very much, David. Thanks for being with us and for your fascinating talk at the Eureka Centre. We're really trying to connect more strongly to this historic site that we're on. So, given your history in working on the listing and your extensive knowledge of the goldfields, we thought you were the perfect choice as the speaker at this year's P Tobin Oration. So, as a gesture of our thanks, we've got some flowers for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, David. And we know that Faye couldn't be with us tonight, so really like to thank the Tobin family, and we have some flowers we'd like you to present to Faye as well. Thank you so much. And just to wind up, I'd like to thank Hermione Higgins, our Education Officer, who's worked hard on not just this event, but delivering almost single-handedly our entire Eureka Centre commemorative program for this year. I'd like to thank the audience that's with us tonight and for your really great questions, which I think has helped further explore some of the themes in David's talk. And to everyone at home who's joined us, very appreciative for your attendance as well. As I mentioned, we're really trying to make that strong connection to the site. We have a visitor guide, so if you'd like to see our new website, which is eurekacenterballarat.com.au, you can actually have a look at that website and see the way that we're trying to connect the museum to not just the Eureka Stockade Memorial Park, but also sites of importance across the world, really, that relate to Eureka. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you same time next year. Good night.